Hello, this is Joan Fernley, your French and Latin diction coach for choirs, and in this video I will read Madrigal by Gabriel Fauré with poetry by Armand Silvestre. As luck would have it, there's more to Madrigal than I first thought. So in the first part of this video, I will share the backstory and historical context, which will be followed by the reading and then followed by some tips for singers and conductors. As always, if you like what I do, like, share, subscribe, and comment below. It really does boost the algorithm and supports my work. Madrigal is one of Fauré's lesser-known works and among a very short list of 5 non-religious choral compositions. These are listed here, but to this list I like to add the all-time favorite Cantique de Jean Racine. As a choral conductor, I think of it much more as a concert piece than as religious music. All this to say that Fauré wrote very little secular choral music. He didn't even write much for the stage. For most of his career, he had a church job, so he wrote church music. His benefactors were active in the Paris salon culture, so he wrote chamber music and plenty of chansons. And as far as these choral pieces go, he also wrote them for specific reasons. He wrote the cantique as a student for a music competition and won first prize. Le Djinn is the only unknown on this list. There's no documented reason why he wrote this piece. He wrote Le Ruisseau for a friend's girls' choir, and La Naissance de Vénus and Pavane were commissions. And finally, our featured piece, Madrigal, was written for his friend and fellow composer André Messager in 1883. Both Fauré and Messager were married in that year, with Fauré being the first of the two to tie the knot. It's been suggested that this was Fauré's wedding gift to Messager. But as wedding gifts go, it's an odd one. The poetry is all about inconstant lovers and the folly of love, not exactly a foundation for a lifetime commitment. But Fauré was no cynic, he was charming, he had a sense of humor. To me, it's clear that Fauré, as a recently married man, is knowingly poking fun at his friend. And the fun didn't stop there. As the wedding organist, it's said that as bride and bridegroom processed solemnly down the aisle, the mischievous Fauré included in his improvisation a theme from one of Messager's Folies bergères ballets. But there's more mischief than just the choice of poetry. There's at least one Easter egg in the song, along with interesting stylistic choices. All this would not be lost on Messager, because both shared the same influences in their formative years at the Niedermeyer Music School during France's tumultuous 19th century. In 1854, 9-year-old Gabriel Fauré crossed the threshold of the newly founded Niedermeyer School, where he would spend the next 11 years as a boarder until 1865. André Messager began his studies in 1869. So our two composers were never fellow students. The two would finally meet in 1871 during the short time when the school was temporarily moved to Lausanne, Switzerland. When the Franco-Prussian War broke out in 1870, the younger students, including Messager, continued their studies safely in Switzerland. Meanwhile, when the war broke out, Fauré left his church job to do his part and joined the infantry. By January 1871, the war was over and Fauré was back at the organ. But that reprieve was short-lived. Trouble erupted again in the spring during the Paris Commune. This time, Fauré escaped the civil unrest thanks to a teaching job at his old school. He taught composition, and among his students were André Messager. This was the beginning of a lifelong friendship. By the time Fauré wrote Madrigal in 1883, France was a decade into the Third Republic, which would eventually be considered a time of prosperity and social progress. But that reality was still in the future. In the 8 decades prior, France had already been governed by 2 empires, 2 constitutional monarchies, and 1 republic. So it's no surprise that for most of the 19th century, France ultimately chose the more familiar conservative leadership of monarchs and emperors. While it didn't go back to the absolute power of the Ancien Régime monarchy, the church was back in favor. And regardless of political leanings, music elites couldn't deny the church's centuries-old role in educating future generations of musicians and its overall music tradition. The Niedermeyer School was a product of that time. Its mission was to provide future church musicians with a well-rounded, high-quality education steeped in early music. Its curriculum was built on the three pillars that were plain chant, the sacred polyphony of the Renaissance, notably Palestrina, and the music of Bach, particularly his organ works. While this might seem like standard fare today, back then much of it was up for debate, particularly the omission of contemporary music. This was short-lived, much to the credit of Camille Saint-Saëns, who joined the faculty in 1861 and made sure to introduce his students, including Fauré, to the modern composers of the day. This was not at the expense of the rest of the curriculum, and the focus on Bach would not diminish under Saint-Saëns' watch. He was a champion of Bach's works in France. The interest in early music was not limited to the Niedermeyer School. While it wasn't everyone's cup of tea as far as concerts go, it was understood by many that this was a foundational element in the development of France's post-revolution musical voice. And to be modern, music would be open to the world, which would include, for example, Eastern influences often embraced by Camille Saint-Saëns, as well as the inescapable cult of Wagner promoted at the Bayreuth Festival, which composers flocked to, and that Faure and Messager attended together in the late 1870s. Now you might think I digress here with all this talk of musical influences, but I promise it's all relevant. In addition to sharing the same musical foundations and influences, both friends, along with many more composers, set music to the poems by Armand Silvestre. In fact, Faure was having a bit of a moment. Just about all the songs he published in the first half of the 1880s were on poems by Armand Silvestre. Madrigal is part of a collection of poems published in 1878 titled Vers pour être chanté, or Poetry to be sung, and it's the second poem under the subheading Madrigaux dans le goût ancien, or old-style madrigals. Fauré's choice of poem, which is about inconstant lovers and the folly of love, was clearly meant to poke fun at Messager. But there's more. Fauré's composition mixes styles that are centuries apart. Faure begins the piece by evoking an ancient mood with a lute-like strumming pattern, and in the opening line he quotes Bach, specifically the opening tune or subject of the E-flat minor fugue from the Well-Tempered Clavier, which is said to be of astonishing complexity. This theme is also found in a chorale from one of Bach's cantatas. This Bach quote is well documented, but sadly that's where the scholarship ends. And this leaves me a bit perplexed, because comedians usually don't stop at one joke. To me, what makes Fauré's decision to quote Bach especially mischievous is the fact that he paired this theme with the line Inhumaine qui sans merci vous raillez de notre souci, which means inhumane, without mercy, you mock our cares. My friend and collaborative pianist referred to this prelude as a nightmare of sharps and double sharps, and that Bach caused grief and anguish to all involved. In other words, this Bach prelude is positively inhumane. Now, if you need a break from all this turmoil and you long for the comfort of a book or a beautiful musical arrangement, allow me to pause and put in a word for my friend's writing and composing talents. So do check the links in the description box below. Aside from this combination of a lute-like piano part paired with the Bach tune, it seems obvious to me that there is more going on in this song. Here's what I mean. At bar 42, Faure introduces a brand new theme which sounds both simple and romantic, accompanied by a lovely arpeggio pattern. And then Faure introduces yet another new theme in bar 94. This one sounds much more dreamy, a style I would definitely associate to Faure. And then at bar 116, Fauré surprises us with a couple of chromatic lines that are clearly meant to evoke the Orientalism that was in vogue. This sudden contrast in style feels like a punchline. Fauré was a master composer, and in my opinion, his eclectic choice of tunes and style is no accident. These would be quotes and references that Messager would instantly recognize. But despite a few too many hours obsessing on this little mystery, I have not solved this riddle. Still, I'm convinced there's more to this song, and I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Inhumaine qui sans merci, vous raillez de notre souci. Aimez, aimez quand on vous aime. Ingrat qui ne vous doutez pas des rêves éclos sur vos pas. Aimez, aimez quand on vous aime. Sachez, ô cruelle beauté, que les jours d'aimer sont comptés. Aimez, aimez quand on vous aime. Sachez, amoureux inconstant, que le bien d'aimer n'a qu'un temps. Aimez, aimez quand on vous aime. Le même destin nous poursuit, et notre folie est la même. C'est celle d'aimer qui nous fuit, c'est celle de fuir qui nous aime. The first tip is all about the sound e, as in bed or as in said. And just like in English, the French e sound is either spelled with an e as in rêve or spelled with the a and I combination as in aimer. The e sound dominates this poem mostly because the verb aimer is repeated 16 times. There are only 2 more words with the ai vowel combination, and both are in the first verse. First we have inhumaine, where the ai combination is pronounced exactly like m, inhumaine. Just like its English counterpart inhumane, inhumaine begins with the in prefix, which signals the opposite meaning of the word that follows. In English, the in prefix is pronounced in. Words with this prefix have a double emphasis. You get inhumane. If you listen closely, there's a subtle separation. It sounds like 2 words. And it's because of that pattern in English, that break, that you get issues in French pronunciation. In French, the in prefix is pronounced usually in, as in injuste or unjust. However, if the prefix is followed by a vowel, it's modified and pronounced in, as in inégal or unequal. We modify because 2 back-to-back vowels sound wrong, and this is because in French the emphasis is usually not on the first syllable of a word, it comes later. We say égal, in English we say equal. So now back to the poetry. Why do we say inhumaine and not inhumaine? After all, H is a consonant. But in reality, the H is not really there. It's silent. It's not even implied. So we say E. So as much as the grammatical syllables are identical in French and in English, the oral syllables are not. The N has to shift. It doesn't belong to the E sound. It belongs to the U sound. I, nu, me, ne. In words like this, singers often anticipate consonants. They might say inhumaine. But knowing that N squarely belongs to U helps avoid this anticipation. It smooths out the musical phrase by eliminating the double emphasis, and it supports the correct pure vowel E rather than the English I. The second word with the ai combination is railler. It doesn't have the S sound at all because it's followed by the double L. You get the I sound. Start with an ah sound and then move quickly to the y sound as in yes, and then that takes you to the final sound E. Put a rolled R at the beginning and you get railler. Our second tip is all about the A sound, and this sound is always a challenge because of the dreaded diphthong. It's a single sound, A, not a double sound, A, as in may. And it's especially important to watch your A's in this song, not only because aimer appears multiple times, but because of some other tricky A's as well. I've laid them out here in a kind of order of difficulty. We have aimer, either spelled with the R or Z final consonant. We have sachet, beauté, and compter that are very exposed at the end of phrases. And before I move on, I want to make a quick mention on compter. The first syllable of compter is definitely con. The M and the P are not voiced. That M signals that it's a nasal sound and the P is completely silent. So be careful not to say compter, but say compter. From here, the A sounds are much less exposed. Railler and douter are in the middle of the phrase, and there's much less time for a diphthong. Finally, the word éclos is the least problematic because the A sound is in the first syllable, not at the end of the word. Many singers struggle to avoid the diphthong despite their best efforts. Most often we try to fix this by focusing on the second sound in the diphthong, but sometimes that misses a fundamental problem, which is that singers often start off with the wrong vowel in the first place. They start with a kind of eh sound that sits further back in the throat, rather than the A sound that is much more forward. If you take the time to fix that first sound, the diphthong almost disappears on its own. So doing this work requires an attention to detail that can feel nitpicky. So if you're up for it, strap in. For our deep dive into A, we will focus on just two words, aimer and sachet. I picked these two words because they contain three sounds that are key to kicking your diphthong habit. A, E, and E. Start by saying A in a very neutral way. No excessive jaw opening, lips are relaxed, your tongue is released, but the tip of the tongue is still in contact with the bottom front teeth. A. From here, you're a ventriloquist and you let the tongue do all the work. From A, you let the tongue curl forward a bit into E. A, E. Nothing else moves, and from here you then go to E, and the tongue curls more. It pushes a bit against the front bottom teeth. A, E, E. And it's good to watch yourself in a mirror, or you can even record yourself on your phone. You really just want to listen to those sounds and also avoid excessive lip and jaw movements. Now that we have the three distinct vowel sounds, we need to add consonants. Let's start with aimer. In this word, we have the E sound followed by E. E, E. Now make a mental note of your tongue position, and now we just sneak in the M. You'll have to close your lips, but try to keep your tongue in position in contact with your bottom teeth. E, me. In speech, most of us, including francophones, will pull the tongue away on an M. And this is fine for speech, but the trick in singing is to start your next vowel at the same time as the M. Now I know this sounds like I'm over-explaining, but it's helpful to think of it that way. And you can even test this by humming an M and just imagining the tongue position shifting from E to E. This exercise is a great way to avoid that sort of spring-loaded effect that you get when the M is released a bit too much, aimer. And when that release happens, it really opens up the vowel a bit too much, and you end up with an S sound instead of E, and then the diphthong is inevitable. The key is to be smooth and just do it really slowly. E, aimer. Now the word sachet is a bit trickier. The S and the SH consonant sounds in sachet require you to engage the tongue away from the bottom teeth. So you'll first want to practice your sounds a, e, to isolate your a and your e. It's the first and the last sound of our little trio. Then take it slowly and isolate the syllables. Sa. That's easy enough. The tricky part comes next. The tongue has to pull back for the SH sound, and there's just no way around it. And then you have to quickly recover your forward position for E right away. I'm really pulling this apart. I know it's nitpicky, but it makes all the difference. So it's exceptionally challenging because most people, including francophones, pronounce their S's and their SH's with an east-west smile. You don't want sachet. That's just going to open up your vowels too much. Vowel placement comes first and consonants are asked to adapt accordingly. If you need E, you need she. No more opening than that. If you need E, you would have she. Don't hesitate to go back to basics. Just one day to the next, review those words because those are the ones that are going to trip you up. And always practice that a, e sequence before adding any consonants. In our final tip, I want to address the final verse full of the double UI combination. The French U sound does not exist in English. And it's difficult because it's the most forward rounded vowel in French. But if you got a good E, you're halfway there. We'll start with the 3-vowel trio and then simply add E by bringing the tongue even more forward against the bottom teeth. A, e, I. And then we round the lips a lot, a bit forward like a trumpet to get our U sound. So let's do the whole sequence. A, I, U. And then to practice that UI sound, we just need to go from I to U, and then we can reverse it. I, U, I, UI. Be very careful to avoid letting the U sneak in there. It's not UI, it's UI. The key difference between the two is the tongue position. For the U, the tongue is placed forward like I. And for U, the tongue is more flat like an A. In fact, we have another little vowel trio, which is A, O, U. It all has a similar tongue placement, and it's just the lips that round more or less. Let's look at a word, poursuit. The whole word is pronounced inside a rounded trumpet-like placement. The U is rounded and the U is rounded. And even the consonants can stay inside that rounded tube-like that we're aiming for. So we say poursuit. So the R is rolled and it doesn't need to get the lips or the jaw involved. So now let's just look at that last verse and I'll just coach you through it. Le même destin nous poursuit. Et notre folie est la même, c'est celle d'aimer qui nous fuit. So we have an E sound, an U, and an U sound in there. Qui nous fuit. And let that F bring you forward. Fuit. And then finally the last line. C'est celle de fuir. Fuir with a rolled R. C'est celle de fuir qui nous aime. Well, there you have it, Madrigal by Gabriel Fauré. Be sure to check out the description box below for all the links, sources, and any additions or corrections that might come up after I post the video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.